Well, thank you very much, Ed. And thank you for the repeated opportunities to share here. I really appreciate it. And I want to also thank Don Baker, who has helped out with the videotaping and actually puts these online on the internet. It's just, and thank your son for me. He did a great job on the musical intro that he wrote for us. Just a lovely little piece. So today, this is a near and dear topic to me. My first significant spiritual tradition was the Rainbow Bridge work, Rainbow Bridge techniques, because as Ed said, it's my family that kicked it all off in the first place. My grandparents, Norman and Josephine Stevens, are the authors of the books. Even though they chose anonymity during their lifetimes, they signed it as two disciples. But I can tell you who they are, actually. They've both left this world quite a while ago now. The books came out in 1975. The first one came out when Norman was 83 or so. So it gives me a lot of hope that there's a lot I can still do with my remaining years. This, by the way, is not about what happens when your pets die. That, if you look up the Rainbow Bridge online, that is actually the most common hit that you'll see there, that your dogs or cats go over the Rainbow Bridge when they pass on. And so, I also mentioned that for the online audience, so they know what they're getting into. May not be what they think it is. It's also not about the book called The Rainbow Bridge by Rajneesh, which came out a few years after the other Rainbow Bridge book. That's a completely different thing. Just wanted to clarify that point too. And unlike all of my other talks, this talk is not about Henry Lawrencey and his teachings. That to me is the clearest presentation of the esoteric facts, summarizing theosophy and the Bailey material in a way that's really good for Western minds to get a hold of. Now, Norman and Josephine actually did some of that too. The Rainbow Bridge book is another rather Western look at it. You know, Norman was a scientist. He studied MIT way back almost 100 years ago. And he was very experimental in his approach, and he was fact-oriented, and he writes the book in a way that doesn't tax your intuition like so many of the spiritual books. He's really trying to just lay it out there clearly for you, and I really admired that when I first read it. Another thing about this talk that's different than others is that it presupposes that you are already familiar with and pretty much have accepted a lot of the basic ideas about esoteric philosophy. From the other talks, I'll take the perspective of trying to basically introduce some of the ideas. And in fact, on May 17th, I'll be back here giving another talk on how you even bring up esoterics in general, how to discuss. I had the interesting good fortune, I suppose, to be on the radio in Port Townsend recently trying to discuss these topics with the general populace. And the people who were interviewing me had pretty much the attitudes of the people in general out there. And they had big question marks over their heads. I could have seen if I was clairvoyant, I'm sure, because they really didn't know what I was talking about half the time. So it's a challenge to really bring out the esoteric ideas in a way that people can understand it. And next talk will be about that. This talk assumes that the law of rebirth is a given. You know, if we're going to talk about the techniques to clear up ancient thought forms from lifetimes you had tens of thousands of lifetimes ago, well, we pretty much have to accept that reincarnation is part of the picture. It also assumes that you are aware of how much more there is to the evolution of consciousness than we have really started with here. That you have a sense of just how much greater the potential is for what we ourselves are to become and what humanity is yet to become. And that hopefully from that you also know that this is temporary, this awful situation the world is in. Humanity is learning through all of its suffering, and we're all going to eventually, individually and as a whole, reach the higher levels of consciousness and really get clear on the fact that love and brotherhood and the unity of all of us is the main point of it all anyway. So when they looked at new potential students, Norman and Josephine, they looked for those understandings in the students, that they had already had the idea that, obviously I continue to exist after death. The people know that for the most part that have made it as far as exploring these things. The full name of the first book is Rainbow Bridge Phase 1, The Link with the Soul. The soul is absolutely the key concept here. Norman emphasized that continually. We're trying to identify with our higher selves. And the soul is a word that's perhaps overused. Lawrence, he critiques Bailey for using it in half a dozen different meanings. And religions have co-opted it to some degree too. But what we're talking about here is your higher self, the non-ego self that isn't subject to all the problems that an ego brings into life. We're talking about the causal self, is a term that you read also in the esoteric books. The self that is you, yet you are still preparing to fully be it. It's always there, yet this is a level of selfhood that knows every incarnation you've had. It's all of everything we've ever been. And can we really contain all of that in our current level of consciousness? That's the challenge. When we've actually built up our understanding, our perspective, our ability to handle the larger picture, then maybe we'll be approaching the ability to know ourselves to be all the people we've ever been. That's one of the challenges of being a causal self, is that everything you've ever been is part of your consciousness. That's probably too overwhelming for me right now. But Rainbow Bridge work is about preparing for that. The Rainbow Bridge itself is a term for the link between the personality and the soul. It's partly how you get there. We cross the Rainbow Bridge, you might say. And deep down we've maybe responded to the song that was the most popular song of the last century, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And we've known that there is a place of consciousness, there is somewhere over the rainbow that we're all longing to get to. It's part of our going home process to know ourselves to be the soul, the one we've always been. So these teachers, Norman and Josephine, they did this not just for their own benefit. They knew that the world was in dire need of people who had actually cleared up their ego problems. I mean, what we've built over our many thousands of incarnations is a personality that right now, this is about the best it's been. We have to realize that we had to spend many incarnations at barbarian levels to get this far. And then at civilizational levels, just barely respecting the law. And we finally worked our way to the point where we not only, try to keep things orderly as a civilizational person, but we've approached the cultural level where we appreciate beauty and art, and the goals of unity, of bringing people together, begin to be appreciated. It's the higher level of emotionality rather than lower. If all of humanity were to be lifted suddenly to the higher level of emotionality, instead of the repellent levels of emotionality that predominate in the world, humanity's troubles would be over. And one of the reasons we're so stuck in our old reality on this planet is the patterns repeat. We tend to redo, without a lot of conscious attention, we repeat our old patterns of behavior and thought. And we look at the world through them, A pattern might be, I can't trust anybody who is trying to help me. People, there are patterns of belief in people that are very deep, that actually prevent them from accepting any help or understanding cooperation. Those kind of patterns have to be cleared out of the way before we can take advantage of all the help that's being offered, all the time. So we talked about the higher consciousness, the higher self. What Lawrence, Rainbow Bridge, Bailey, Theosophy all agree on is that the evolution of consciousness is what we're up to here. That's the spoiler alert. That's what we're trying to do here, is evolve as consciousnesses. We can take a step in that direction right now with an exercise. I mentioned how we often respond to life in ways that are patterns that have been built long ago and aren't really serving us. Well, we know that we do that in our daily lives now. We're conscious, we're choosing, but maybe not consciously choosing. So often we let our automatic responses, our mechanical thinking, make our choices for us. If we are aware of our consciousness, being truly self-conscious, not, acne self-conscious, truly self-conscious, aware of consciousness, we realize that we choose continually. Everything in our future is based on all the little choices we make all the time. The people who are creating wonderful futures for themselves are choosing very carefully what they think about, where they put their energy. So right now, you can have a look at your awareness. Be aware of your awareness. That's where the self is. Where the attention is where the self is. That's true self-consciousness, to wake up to yourself being aware. I start all my talks with that exercise. And thank you for allowing me to compete for your attention with all the other things going through your heads at this moment. It's a tricky business, consciousness, and actually keeping it focused on one thing. There are other terms for this kind of consciousness, presence of mind. It is a kind of presence. You are present when you are conscious of being conscious, when you know you're being aware, you're present. And this idea of being present, being the witness, as Eckhart Tolle calls it, there's also an element of presence to it. The more you can practice this being present, the closer you get to sensing the presence of your higher self, the presence of your greater consciousness. That's one of the signs that you're getting very close to being able to break through to that level. Well, let's talk about the techniques. And obviously, there's plenty of work to do to get to this level of full awareness, soul awareness. There are techniques that can help, and Norman and Josephine were determined to find them. In fact, Norman, his whole life, was a seeker. At one point, he knew that in that library over there was something that he really needed. He'd thrown out all those books recently, and he went in the library and just reached up on the shelf and grabbed The Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky. Just walked right to it and found it that way. It's quite a story. And he studied theosophy intently. He wore out 3 sets of these volumes of Alice Bailey books here, going through them repeatedly, rereading them and digesting them from different levels of... These are books that you can certainly reread because they appeal to you on the intuitive level. They're, I think, pretty advanced material and harder for me than a lot of the other material because it keeps trying to lead you in a direction that says, okay, now just get it with your intuition. I may be too concrete-minded to always follow that route. That's why I like Lawrence so much. He doesn't do that. But still, it's all there. Lawrence says that is where that information can be found that he is talking about. So Norman studied. As I said, he was a scientific person. He and Winona, my grandmother, the first wife, blood grandmother, they got involved with the Arcane School, which is in New York and is involved with Alice Bailey founded it. And they knew Alice Bailey, and I actually found a letter, and my aunt sent me a box of letters. It's so fascinating to go through. I found a letter from my grandmother to somebody else describing going to New York with Norman. Norman went to New York and had lunch with Alice and Foster Bailey. And at one point, Alice took Winona aside, took her by the arm, took her aside and said, look at those two. Look how they understand each other. They really get along well. Those aren't the exact words, but it's so interesting to get that view into this is Alice Bailey. I actually have a letter from her. It was a little show and tell after the talk. I've got a letter that she wrote to my grandmother I could show you. Winona died in about 1954, and that's about when the big, vast fortune they had ran out. And that's another story. I've told some of it, and it's all going in a book I'm writing. But we're getting on to the next phase of his life where his spiritual seeking took the precedence. And he met, not too long after, he met Josephine through the Arcane School. Josephine was working as Alice Bailey's secretary, one of her secretaries, handling correspondence with different students. And Alice would assign her a student and she would write back and forth. And then Alice would critique the conversation. Norman got involved, was a director of the Arcane School for a number of years. I'm not sure if Josephine did that too. But they probably met through that. I don't exactly know how they met, but they lived in Burbank. And Josephine had not really advertised a special thing that she could do. Turns out that she was a clairvoyant of the highest degree. She could look not only and see fuzzy blobs of color, she could see the fine edges of the structures in a person's field, look into their nerve structure and see how energy was flowing. She could see the etheric, the subtler physical energy body, and the emotional body, also called the astral. She could see the sublevels of that. So something happened that really brought Norman and Josephine together. Norman had been experimenting with all the techniques. And in the 60s in California, new things were being born all the time. This was really a pretty exciting time to be down there. He investigated Scientology and he investigated teachings of the inner Christ, and that was forming down there. And it was all fascinating to him. And then he found some breathing exercises. And these breathing exercises, I don't know if they do that much for most people, but they certainly did things for him. They opened his chakras prematurely. He was very successful in the goal of the breathing exercises to the point that it almost killed him. And he has cautioned me, ever since he cautioned me about breathing exercises. Be very careful. And exercises also to attempt to raise the kundalini are potentially, can go horrifyingly wrong. Just be very careful. These breathing exercises, they open the chakras, and he felt like he was dying. He lost something like 30, 40 pounds in a couple of weeks. He was sure he was dying. And he went to Josephine, and he said, "I know you can see. Help me." He knew she couldn't, though she hadn't admitted it. Somehow he'd figured it out. So she looked, and she saw that when the chakras were opened, energy poured through and burned away the surrounding material that was the concretized thought material and emotional material that ultimately the Rainbow Bridge work is designed to clear from your fields, that we all have this stuff. We're all trying to clear it away. But this was actually burned away at a rapid rate, and our bodies need to dispose of the residue, just like in the physical body. We've got, we're processing material. There's a whole elimination system. This was not functioning for him to the degree that it took to keep everything cleared out, because so much stuff was being burned in his field. He had to figure out some way to deal with that. Even though she saw it, they still didn't know what to do. So they worked, and they would try this, and he would try that, and she would say, "No, that has changed nothing, Try this mantra or that technique." Nothing. What they did discover was based on the old, what they call the occult maxim: energy follows thought. When he visualized a vortex of energy spinning above his head, just like you are probably doing now, because I've described it. When you think something, you are manipulating mental material, the substance of the mental plane. When you do that, you're drawing stuff together into the form that you have imagined. It's very transient, it comes and goes quickly, and it responds instantly, the human will. Very different than physical reality. It's difficult to get to respond to you when you want it to. But he visualized this vortex. She could see that when he imagined it passing through his body, it picked up the debris, and he would imagine it going way down to the earth. It would carry that extra stuff that had to be cleared out of his field. It would carry it deep into the earth. That is what finally helped him. But even that took one more thing to really be effective, and that was to say, "I am the soul." To identify with the higher self before doing any of the procedures, everything went much more quickly, much more effectively. Norman used to say, it doesn't matter if you're a holy roller. If you say, I am the soul first, you're going to roll even better. That's a pretty old term now, a holy roller. But there's a third thing that they observed that Josephine, through really studying, observed was a thread-like channel that passed all the way through from extending far above, deep into the earth below, that passed through the body. And actually, she observed this in everybody, and that in some people it was wider, it was more developed. It was a way for energy to pass through and ground you for earth energy, energy from above to meet, to properly be distributed and not get congested anywhere. So those three things became the essence of the Rainbow Bridge Phase 1 book. The identification with the soul, the use of the central channel, the clearing. They developed a technique for clearing the central channel. And I'll go into that in a little bit. They also developed the spiritual vortex, and that's something that I've been in Rainbow Bridge groups now since 1980, actually, now that I think about it. And it's been very effective for everyone concerned. I get a lot of people saying that are very glad to have the useful technique like that just simply takes stuff out of your field. I've been in incredible emotional states and decided I don't want to feel this way. And took a vortex down, imagined it forming, going through, and we'll go through how. And it took me right out of that state, completely out of it. I was just amazed. And then I looked across the room and saw her walk in a door with another guy, and all the energy, all the emotional energy came back again. So. It's tricky business, emotional energy. So, Norman was my teacher for a number of years. When I discovered the Rainbow Bridge book, I was driving down to see him. My father gave it to me. He said, you should read this before you go see your grandfather. And I was 21 or so, and I read the book, and it was pretty amazing stuff. I didn't know quite what to make of it, but then I got a lot of it along the way. But then when he opened the door, I recognized him as my teacher. And tears came to my eyes, and it was a big moment for me. But one thing, he used to ask me, okay, what's your daily meditation? I was his student for many years, and he would ask, okay, what do you do when you meditate? And I said, well, I sit down and take a couple of breaths, and I try to get centered, and maybe centered front to back and left to right. No, he would say, no, always start with the soul mantra. That's not only the way to be effective, that's actually your protection too. Coming from the soul level is coming from a level that is beyond ego. Energy, the soul supports your efforts that are in the right direction. If you're trying to do good things, if you're trying to grow in a good spiritual way, you've got all the support in the universe through your soul. But if you're trying to do these techniques, spiritual techniques, meditative visualization techniques, as a personality, the motives can get misaligned with what you actually end up accomplishing, and things can get in trouble. Really, all spiritual techniques need to be done from as pure a place as possible because there's power involved in them. Power to change yourself, certainly. The Rainbow Bridge book was the result of all of their efforts, Norman and Josephine. They actually formed a prototype group of people that meditated together who really, I met a lot of these folks many years ago, and they're very dynamic people that you wouldn't guess until you looked in their eyes and realized just how much incredible energy they were in touch with. They built this group. They did a number of experiments, clearing experiments, experiment with the vortex, with the central channel. And the result of that, and of all of the seeking and searching over the years, was the Rainbow Bridge book, Phase 1, which the bookstore has, even though it's technically out of print. But thank you, Alia, for bringing a case of books. The Phase 2 book, I'll tell you more about that later, but unfortunately it's not in print, but you can get them used online. So the Phase 1 book was very popular in 1975, and it was part of kicking off the whole New Age movement, actually. Tens of thousands of them were sold over the first year, and they just kept selling steadily for many years after that. And it had instructions in it for forming groups, meditation groups. So many people did that it helped other people discover it. In 1980, I just moved to Santa Cruz, and I went in the bookstore, and there was a poster, Rainbow Bridge Group forming. I thought that was just my family's stuff. I didn't know anybody else knew that much about it at the time. So I joined that group, and I've been in groups ever since. One way that I know that these books affected people was that I called the Lucius Trust a number of years ago to see if they wanted a copy for their library of the Rainbow Bridge. It was maybe 10 years ago. And the woman said, it was through the Rainbow Bridge book that I found the Lucius Trust. So I know that I bought every copy, every Alice Bailey book mentioned in the Rainbow Bridge book, I bought after I read the book. Norman and Josephine were actually, working with the Arcane School. They were people working on a level beyond anything I have been able to work on. And it's almost a challenge to feel like I can do justice talking about it. They actually worked with the spiritual leadership of the planet. They had somebody that would come and help them with their writing of the books. And they called him the brother. And he didn't come in physical form, but Josephine could see him. One example they gave of how he helped them was when they were about to put the book out, or in the final phases of it, they were going to put a quote in it that was summed up something very nicely. But the brother came and told them, no, you don't want to put that quote in there because the teacher that said that has gone off track. And if you put that in there, people might start to follow him rather than these teachings. So they put a different quote in. So the group that they had down there attracted some attention. Josephine's abilities did actually become known to a broader circle when they were living in Burbank at the time. And Aldous Huxley and Laura Huxley, his wife, used to come visit. They were friends of Norman and Josephine's. And I wish I knew more about what they talked about, but I just know that they were friends. Timothy Leary showed up and brought Richard Alpert. The two Harvard professors who really were a big part of the 60s talking about LSD. What they were interested in asking Josephine about was whether the drugs they were taking was doing any damage to them. Josephine said yes. But the thing is, they were taking LSD like it was vitamin C. So, of course, they really overdid it. They thought they discovered such a great new thing, and, well, they overdid it. And she said that they were damaging the nerves to some degree from overstimulation. Years later, a fellow with a white robe showed up, and Josephine said, I know you, you're Alpert. You're Richard Alpert. And he said, oh, well, that's what I used to be called. I'm now Ram Dass. And he is another key figure of the 60s and 70s, and his book, Be Here Now, is quite a classic. He was back for another examination. She said that your teachers in India, what she told him was that his teachers in India had actually healed most of the damage and had sealed off a bit that they couldn't heal. So that it wasn't affecting him. He was basically back to full health. So she was able to tell him that. And I just found out, my aunt just told me the other day, that Steven Spielberg apparently also visited Norman and Josephine. And that brings up a funny circumstance because we were just down walking past Steven Spielberg's house last May to go visit Norman and Winona's property that's up in the hills beyond this extremely wealthy neighborhood. And that there's this urban legend that Nazis lived there. And I'm quashing that legend with a book I'm working on now. But I'm sure Steven Spielberg is very aware of Murphy Ranch. And he may not know that the same people he was talking to back then are associated with Murphy Ranch. So I'm looking forward to telling him. So if you happen to be talking to Steven Spielberg, don't spoil the surprise.
It's going to be on YouTube.
Oh, well, I hope he watches it. It's on YouTube. Norman actually spoke right here one time. He came up. Linda was here, and Mark was here, to hear him. And I even have a couple pictures from that event in the back. But he traveled around a lot. He lived until he was 102. And he's spent his last 10 or so years in Sweden, where he was kind of the guru from over the sea, and lived in a Findhorn-like community called Stjärnsund, north of Stockholm. And it was through Norman that I found the Lorentzi material. He met the translator there, Lars Edelsko, and told me about the Lorentzi material. So right to the end, and way into his 90s, he was discovering incredible things. 2 weeks before he died, he'd spoken to a crowd of 200 people in Stockholm. And he was he had an incredible energy about him, of his intensity. You had no doubt that what he was talking about was the real deal. He was a powerful individual. I'm trying to dig up old videotapes I have of him to put on the website. So let's talk more about the essence of the Rainbow Bridge techniques, what they're really all about, and how we can use them. The identification with the soul, obviously, we've mentioned. That's key. And it's not just that when you get the soul involved, you don't have to do all the work yourself. The soul is actually its own independent acting assistant for you in a way. And there's a big mystery in that, how it can be both our personalities here and be this divine soul at the same time. But I gave a whole talk on it, and you can watch it on YouTube if you want. Lorentzi cleared that up for me and talked about the nature of egoides. That's really the answer to that, but I can't spend a lot more time on that. Still, basically, you have this conscious, very powerful and wise being helping you with your spiritual progress. The fastest progress you can make is through consciously cooperating with that, invoking the soul, acting as if you were the soul, starting all your meditations with I am the soul, and following these techniques. I think I've got some pictures I forgot to bring up here with me. I'm going to go back and get in a second, but I can show you. The soul's been waiting for this. Millions of years we've been going through the human kingdom. It's a slow progress to make the approximately 120,000 incarnations it takes to get through the human kingdom. And all through this, the soul watches and waits for us and sees the laws of karma and of rebirth working slowly on us, and we learn that way. When we finally consciously reach for that higher self, reach to get the bigger awareness, big things become possible quickly. Got that letter from Alice Bailey here for show and tell. Norman's incredible artwork. He was a great draftsman. This is the great invocation that he drew up with this chart. I can show you after too. But what Josephine could see when she looked at somebody was something like this. And she said, we're like walking thunderclouds. And this is actually a student who's come a long way in their school. You can see there's a lot of radiance of the soul star up here. There's radiance from the solar plexus. There's clarity around the head. This is what a disciple would look like who is still working on a lot of things, but there's a lot to do there to clear that aura up. So the vortex is a very powerful technique and clears up the more foggy, miasma-like is what they called it, elements. The muddy colors are the ego energy muddies up the colors. As soon as you get the ego involved, the colors get brownishy, dirty, greeny, and it's not nearly as pretty. As somebody who's focused with soul consciousness exclusively has got very clear, bright colors in their field. So let's talk a little bit about what you can see here. Here's a key idea that I emphasize a lot. Everything is something. Your emotions, your thoughts, they have a material component to them. They're made out of the material of the emotional and mental worlds. And they can be addressed as material. This is what this material is in this field. These are thoughts and emotions congealed. The denser, darker things are very strongly held beliefs and things over lifetimes. Associated with different parts of the body are different kinds of patterns. If you look around the head, are patterns of, around the head and neck are patterns of ideals. Like these glowing, brightly colored patterns up here are the things, the images of angels and God and worshipped concepts. They're really kind of beautiful ideas, but they're still ideas that stand between you and an actual understanding of what's going on. And ultimately, those have to be cleared too. They're filters that block you from direct perception of the truth. Around the back are emotional mental complexes about self-worth and self-image and responsibility in the back and shoulders. Around the torso are patterns of animal nature, self-preservation, aggression, fear, sexual patterns, basically lower level emotional energy. And then there's this, they mentioned that even though these are the same category, it's somewhat different. Around the feet are the patterns based on situations that you wish you could run away from. A clairvoyant actually sees these, and they actually do affect people's ability to walk. I've seen people, kind of weighed down by the complexes of emotional and mental energy, and if you're clairvoyant, you'd see exactly why. So that's the first look at that. Now, this student they worked with, and she did a lot of vortexing and line work. Not line work. This is the vortexing and clearing the central channel, and this is a later phase here of that person's progress. And they documented things really carefully. Norma was very scientific. They're diagrams showing this cage. See the darker black stuff around there, they refer to as the auric cage. And it's made of particularly dense and awful stuff. And we all have this, and don't feel bad that you have it. We're all beyond it. That's why we need to work on the purifying techniques. We're really trying to not be controlled by this stuff at all in any way. We don't even want to carry it around. We want to be done with it. So you can see that the soul stars is so much more radiant here from the meditation that she's done. Just blazingly brilliant. And she's cleared up a lot of stuff, but there's certainly more to do. The phase 1 techniques will get you to this point, basically. It's what we're told. Continually vortexing, working in the central channel, invoking the soul, and this is actually so much more pleasant for a clairvoyant to look at than the other. But the phase 2 techniques take you to the next level beyond that, which is this, where you've basically cleared all the stuff out, all the residue of bad misunderstandings of life, of fear and separateness and aggression, all of that kind of residue in your field cleared out. This was a very sweet woman. I'm pretty sure this is Marjorie Hall that I met years later. So this takes the phase 2 work. The phase 1 work will get you to this level, but the phase 2 work is what actually works on the dense cage of particularly dark things. Phase 2 work is really not for the faint of heart, actually. It's actually pretty intense. Phase 1 work anybody can do if they've pretty much got the acceptances we talked about in place. They're willing to work with the idea of the soul. Phase 2 work is pushing your own buttons. You make statements that stimulate these patterns, and the kind of patterns, when somebody does push your button, they are hitting one of your patterns. That's how you know somebody is stimulated. You're just immediately irritated by something somebody has done. They've pushed your button. That's actually an opportunity. That's called a horizontal stimulation of a pattern, some horizontal impact. It happens to us all the time, We get cut off in traffic and, your patterns are activated. And all too often, we strengthen the pattern instead of actually dealing with it. When we give in to the energy of that pattern, we're actually adding energy to it and contributing to why it's so permanent. These These go with you lifetime after lifetime. Another word for them is the samskaras. They are the property of the personality, and you will, in every incarnation, have them to deal with until you've cleared them. So the line work uses the words never and always to push your buttons. But instead of it being a horizontal impact, it's vertical. It says you're doing this with soul energy involved. You invoke the soul. I like to do it with a group too. It's even better. But I've done the work individually. It felt like it was very powerful too. The line work, and you do a little meditation first to be in the right place. You invoke the soul, and then you say a line. And the lines take the form of a sentence. I always blah, 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 and you never blah, blah, blah. There's variations, 64 variations of that. And it's not just I, you variations. It's I and myself. Your relationship with yourself is part of our legacy of patterns. Are not accepting or judging or belief in our sinful nature, whatever, those kind of things are deep patterns that are our relationship with ourselves. So of course we want to clear those. And an example of a line might be using the word do. You plug a verb into this space in the line. I always desire to do everything for you, and you never do anything for me. You feel that? Anybody feel that hit a pattern? Well, that's why it's it's tricky business. You want to meditate first. You want to get in the right space to do it, and you want to have that soul energy handy, because these patterns are energy structures. And if enough energy is poured into them, they shatter. They cannot withstand it. Instead of putting energy into it by indulging it, and I'm so mad, you actually bring in the soul energy, and it pours the energy in to the point where the pattern is destroyed. And printers run out of ink so fast these days, but here's a picture that illustrates that. The energy is pouring in from the soul level. This person said this particular line. Energy is pouring in from the soul level, going out through the throat chakra and directly to the pattern, and stimulates it to the point where it destroys it. Now these patterns are built out of repetition, and we have a continual stream that is just our natural right to have of spiritual energy that pours through us. But so much of it is diverted into these little, they have a vortex nature of their own, these patterns. They're just ways the energy is trapped in this little rotation. And the energy is stuck there. And so much, instead of being released in our lives, life more abundant as we would like to have, the patterns end up sucking up a lot of it. When you destroy them, that energy is released. Huge bursts of light and color and good energy come out of destroying them. And it also creates that kind of residue we were talking about. There's kind of like a clairvoyant would see a sooty, smoky residue that you've got to use the vortex to clear out. So to do the line work, first of all, you need the central channel through. You need to be able to, for energy to ground out, pass through easily. You need to be proficient with the vortex, because you don't want to be breaking up these patterns just to have that debris reaccumulate on some other pattern, somewhere else in your field. You want to use the vortex and use the vortex to take it deep down into the earth. So basically talking about the benefits here, a little bit more about the techniques. If you've got, and here's another illustration. If you're going to take some time for this to clear the channel, this is another book that's long out of print that a friend and I put together back in the 80s. It was storyboard for a video that we were going to make that never got made. But it shows extending a line of light. This is part of the group technique, but we'll get onto that more in a minute. But this is part of it, extending a line of light to link soul stars. That's part of a group meditation. And you, with each other, and you ultimately form these beautiful geometric patterns once you've linked soul star to soul star, patterns of light. But what I wanted to show you was the clearing of the central channel. what they recommend is to do it in a series of triangles, where you imagine the soul star. Of course, the soul star is really doing this work. So all you need to have is your attention and your imagination involved, and everything else happens. So you imagine, first you say, I'm the soul, you say the soul mantra, but you imagine the soul star moving down this triangular path into the central channel, rising up, and it clears the channel as it goes. And we go through, you might do that for a week or two until you feel like the soul star can easily move through that triangle, easily move back up in that space. You just repeat that for several minutes. But whenever you do it, when you're done, you want to flush it with the spiritual vortex. So here's an example of all of the different triangles that you eventually make. Once you finish this one, then you work on the next to the throat, to the heart, to the solar plexus. And these aren't actual chakras or centers we're talking about here. This is just, you imagine it ultimately, in our group meditation, we imagine it moving right down to the bottom in front of the feet, in, and then up the central channel, which is actually safe to do even if you haven't done the intermediate ones. I asked Norman about that. And that's fine to do in a group where you're not sure where everybody's at with their level of developing and opening the channel. You can just move it all the way down to below in front of your feet, in, and then up. And it goes at a different speed for each person. It never stops. It moves steadily upwards, but it might slow down. You might sense it's spinning. It's burning away blockages in the channel and widening it as it goes. So the vortex has got a good illustration here too. This is illustrating after you've done some line work, or any kind of clearing work, this clearing the central channel, you've got some debris in your field. So how do you get rid of that? You imagine energy follows thought. You imagine this vortex forming up high above you, and it spins clockwise as you look at it from above. That's because of the hemisphere we're in, and I'm not sure if it would be the other way if you were south of the equator. But that's the only place I've conducted a meditation is north of the equator. So you set this vortex in motion with your imagination. It's something you feel free to really imagine it. Give it whirlwind powers and imagine you can almost hear it. It's so strong. The more you can do that, the stronger it is. It passes right through your body. And down into the earth, and you can repeat the vortex, or maybe it will go slowly enough. So you really need about 6 to 8 minutes of vortexing after a cleaning exercise, a clearing exercise. So it can be a series of vortices that you do that are moving down quickly, or just one that's just really scrubbing thoroughly as it goes. And I'm going to actually mention the context for invoking the vortex in a meditation. I'm going to go through the steps that we go through in our Tuesday night Rainbow Bridge meditation. Some of you are very familiar with that. Now this particular work, this clearing work, it's relatively new that we're given these techniques to do it ourselves. For eons, it was the responsibility of your teacher in a lamasery or a monastery. You would go there and they would work with you. There were so few actually who were ready for this final clearing phase, clearing up all the old stuff to get you ready to move on to soul consciousness. So few were ready that they were each handled individually. Well, there are so many now. There are millions. So at this point, people are given the instructions and given the information, and it's hidden in a different way than it used to be. It used to be secret. Now it's on the internet. So you still have to find it. But I'm trying to help with that. The techniques can save you lifetimes, according to Norman and Josephine. It takes lifetimes to clear off this stuff. And the need is too urgent. The times now we're at a crossroads, and I know people say it all the time. It seems like spiritual teachers are always saying, oh, any moment now. But we've been at a crossroads before with the world wars. We quite surprisingly defeated the organized forces of darkness of the time, which really usually it doesn't happen. That was surprising. And And we made it to this point, and now we're in danger of losing the gains in terms of our values that we got from that. We're treating war like another fun adventure all too often. Material values have taken precedence over spiritual values in many different ways. And we're entering this Aquarian age with its new kind of energy coming in that gives us tremendous abilities to manifest things in the world. That's a double-edged sword. We really need to get ourselves cleaned up, so we're trying to do good things with that energy. Otherwise, things can go either way. They can be really wonderful or not so much. So the more people that can clean up their fields and clean out their misunderstandings of reality that are blocking them and making them scared to try and keeping them from sharing and trusting, the more people that can clean that out of their fields, the sooner we can reach that level of culture as humanity as a whole, where we're all working from the attractive emotional levels, the aesthetic emotional levels, instead of the repellent ones. Soul energy is a powerful thing. And getting started with this technique, you really want to just take it gradually and make sure you're comfortable with the energy that comes through. The higher a level an idea comes from, the more energy it contains, which is exciting for me when I research. I run into an idea and I'm very inspired by it. That's why you're inspired. It's coming from a level of great energy. You can also get carried away with that. I met one of Norman's students who actually basically went off the deep end with it. He became convinced that he alone represented the white brotherhood in humanity's efforts to vanquish evil, and it was a very exciting life he lived, except that it was all illusory, and he basically lost his connection to reality, and he lost his connection to other people. And that's really, among the people I've known who've lost their minds in one way or another, that's the one thing I've identified, is that they fail to pass a particular test of sanity, which is the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes. So if you're trying these techniques, a group is certainly one way to stay safer. You can share your experiences and talk with them and keep your perspective from their perspective and help them with the same thing. If you're going to do it on your own, make sure you're meditating and you're in your heart. You're not just in your head. You watch out for the signs of ego that want to make you into the latest messiah. It was a shame to see this otherwise intelligent person wander down that path. So let me go through what we do in meditation. I've discussed the techniques already, the clearing the channel and the vortex, but there are certain mantras that we say too that are very powerful. And of course, we always start with, I am the soul. There's a mantra that was given out that is absolutely essential. And I've included in the sheets there the exact instructions for performing a group meditation or an individual meditation. It can be used for either. So we say the soul mantra, which is, I am the soul, I am the light divine, I am love, I am will, I am fixed design. And most people have a pretty easy grasp of that. We're talking about fundamental, primary, basic energies of the soul. But the last one is often subject to questions, and what is intended by that is the plan for this incarnation. That of all the things we've been and skills we've acquired, our causal self has accumulated from all of our incarnations. We only incarnate with some of those abilities in one particular incarnation. We have particular goals. We've got karmic goals to complete, destiny goals, mental, emotional integration to achieve, to become an integrated personality. And we're given the ingredients for that. If we've been a Mozart one lifetime, we're probably not going to be born ready to play the piano the next lifetime. It's just enough, There are other things to do besides the one thing we might have worked 7 incarnations on to get so good at. We've got to master the broad spectrum of things. So we come in with a limited set of the tools. That's what fixed design refers to. We say that together, and the next thing after that is we say the mantra of unification, we've got a little difference in our group. I'm going to go to the one that is generally used. After much meditation and consideration in our group, we degenderified it, thinking that the time has come. And we also took out some phrases. It used to say, I seek to love, not hate. We figured we don't need the not hate in there anymore. The mind doesn't even understand not hate very well. It understands I seek to love. That's what leaves an impact and creates changes in you. Telling yourself not to do something is not the most effective thing. So we took that part out. It's basically, all of us are one. I seek to love. I seek to serve. I seek to heal. Let pain bring due reward of light and love. Let the soul control the outer form and life and all events and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate and outer divisions be gone. Let love prevail. Let all of us love. This is an ancient mantra from Atlantean times. What the Tibetan says about this, who brought this mantra back for us in the Bailey books, was that I've got to find the right page here in my sheets. Well, he said it basically came from a time that was similar to the World War II time of this time, a very tough time, Atlantean times. But it's capable of producing really powerful effects in a person's life. And certainly in the group, I feel it does. Next thing we do is bring our attention to the soul star that Josephine could have seen over our heads, and try to center your consciousness there to the degree that you can. You imagine it shining like a little sun, and then we link to each other's soul stars, thinking of each other person in the group. We imagine a line of light that extends from our soul star to that person's soul star, and that makes that pattern I showed you just briefly, the geometric form of all those lines of light linking a group of people together. It can be very beautiful. We then link to the group soul star in the center and above the group. Every group has its own little center. And so we link our soul star to that. And then we link in everything and everybody else. We link in the meditation that happens here on Tuesday nights.
Likewise.
Oh, good. We imagine a line of light that sweeps out from the group soul star like a lighthouse beam, sweeping out around and linking in everybody doing soul work, all the other individuals and groups in the area. We imagine it sweeping out further and further until it's crossing the water from Port Townsend to get to Seattle. We link to the various groups here doing, I think there are a couple of groups that we name here that we know we're doing meditations. Link up to Orcas Island, to Indralaya, to the great Deva there at Indralaya. I don't have time to talk about what Devas are, but I think most of you know. And then we link to Eckhart Tolle up in Vancouver, because I think he's really one of the amazing teachers on the planet. Next, we lift the group soul star and link it into the network of light that surrounds the planet, which this artist has illustrated this way. Bruce Harmon in Santa Cruz did a fine job with this. Our printer lost the artwork and he did it again.
Wow.
And then we lost it and he did it again.
Wow.
So we link to the heart center of the planet, the planetary hierarchy, which is, hopefully you know about them. They're the center for love on the planet. We link to Christ, who is certainly not somebody that is held hostage by religious views of him. He is actually the head of the planetary hierarchy and serves to bridge the hierarchy with the head center of the planet, Shambhala. So we also link to Shambhala. Then we say, in the wisdom of the soul, we invoke the pure white light of the Christ. That energy pours down into the group. The group has its own central channel, just like individuals do. And the Christ energy pours down through, along with other energies from our linking up. And we imagine that going out around us and forming a protective sphere of white Christ light. And that technique is very useful if you feel you need protection. Christ light is, in my own experience, has handled some difficult situations for me that there really isn't anything on the planet that will mess with it. So we've linked up now, so we bring our attention back and work on the phase 1 Rainbow Bridge techniques, which is to work on the, we bring our attention back to our soul stars. We imagine the soul star moving through the triangular path that I talked about earlier that goes down in front of, below the feet, as if you were standing. Even if you're sitting, it's as if you were standing, moves in till it's directly beneath you and rises up the channel, clearing it and broadening it at whatever speed it takes, but it doesn't stop. It just gradually keeps widening and clearing. We'll do that for 5 minutes or so. It's just a rough feel, and say, okay, everybody, this is the last triangle. So you imagine the soul star stopping when it gets back above. One key thing is the soul is doing the real work here. All we have to do is remember we're doing it. If our minds wander, we keep bringing them back. We put our attention on what we're doing, we imagine clearly, and it all works. Once we've done that, we say an even more ancient mantra that DK says predates Sanskrit and Senza. The affirmation of the disciple. I am a point of light within a greater light. I am a strand of loving energy within the stream of love divine. I am a spark of sacrificial fire focused within the fiery will of God, and thus I stand. I am a way by which others may achieve. I am a source of strength enabling them to stand. I am a beam of light shining upon their way, and thus I stand. And standing thus revolve, and tread this way the ways of men, and know the ways of God, and thus I stand. What it means by revolve is that we approach the gates to the next kingdom, where we can see all the potential and the beauty and the light and the love that's our next step, where we're going. But we turn from that. We turn our back on that temporarily and step back and walk the ways of men. We didn't degenderify that. We thought ways of men, yeah, that's right. We walk back to that and serve, giving from the light that we've discovered and the love that we discovered. And know the ways of God, ways of God. God is an interesting concept. We're not talking about a biblical religious concept of God. We're talking about all the divine consciousness of all the kingdoms beyond human. They're all united, all those consciousnesses, unlike us. That's what I think of in terms of God, is the united consciousness of all the higher worlds. Serving us through all the different beings that are here to help humanity, the great teachers and the devas and the individual goeties helping each of us has our own guardian angel helping us. So we say that affirmation of the disciple in the spot in the meditation where we have stuff in our fields. We're reminding ourselves who we are after we've stirred up the patterns. So then we want to invoke the spiritual vortex. We all say together, in the wisdom of the soul, we invoke the spiritual vortex. In our group, we've taken a particular form of it, seems to work well and keep people awake. That is to imagine it forming way up there, 50 feet up there, getting very clearly formed up there, and then rapidly dropping down into the group, just down to the top of the group's field. And for a group, it's 15 feet wide, 20 feet wide as it needs to be to pass through the whole group. We imagine it so the top of it is above, the tip is below, and then it stops when it reaches the group. And then for a couple of minutes, it's passing through our fields. And it helps to breathe, to relax, to release whatever's in your field so that it can pick it up and carry it away. Just consciously think of letting go of stuff. Every day we pick up more stuff. If we think someone is considered our appearance, for instance, and we're feeling sensitive about that for some reason, that thought sticks to us. We've allowed that to stick to us. We need to be a little more Teflon about people's thoughts about our appearance. But any thoughts about us that we kind of take on ourselves become part of that turbulent mass of stuff that we don't want to carry around. And so the vortex will sweep that right away. That's easy for the vortex to sweep away. We also don't tend to think all that clearly, most of us. So we think halfway through an idea, or we start thinking of something, we stop, and we leave these remnants of our thoughts and our hopes and our emotions laying around in our field, and they're just kind of decomposing slowly. That's not the best thing to have in your field. So it's good to flush those out too with the vortex.
Did you mention the direction of the energy as it flows in a group from here into the center and spiraling down?
Yeah, I'll mention that. As the vortex is passing through all our bodies, as Todd mentions, it's important to remember that it's not taking all the stuff and passing it through everybody's bodies that it's picked up from each of us. It carries it into the center and down. That's where it winds up, is below the group, outside of our fields, our individual fields. It's still in the group field, but it's carried down below us. It's also important you're all thinking about it spinning the same direction. As you can imagine, if you've got one person thinking it's spinning this way, another person spinning that way, it's counterproductive. So, clockwise from above, everybody, if you're thinking about it. Let's just, yeah, looking down at it. The great big vortex that we're all imagining going right through this room right now is clockwise from above. And it's carrying all the stuff down into the earth. For about 2 minutes, we imagine it passing through our fields. And then we imagine the earth opening up below us equally wide as the vortex. And then we send it down. The vortex drops away, falls deep into the earth. At the same time, we imagine a big shaft of white light coming that's just as wide as the vortex that comes down and continues to pour down through the group. It's pushing the vortex deep into the earth. And I figure it's good to give it as much assistance as possible to get it away from us. This is stuff we intentionally chose to get rid of. Let's push it down there, deep into the earth. And of course, having white light pass through our bodies can only be good. It is only good. That's always an energy you can work with safely, is white light. Even some colors, you have to flush yourself with white light after using violet light, for instance. Violet light can purify and kill off bacteria and viruses and things like that. But you always want to flush with white light afterwards because you don't want to leave it there in its scrubbing mode. So after it's gone down more than 50 feet, you want it out of the group's field. Once it's deep enough in the earth, you can imagine whoever's leading the group says the earth closes back up above it. We release the vortex, it stops spinning, and it ceases to exist. And everything it picked up actually has a kind of value for the lower kingdoms deep in the earth. They absorb it and use it, and it's a higher vibrational frequency than what they've got there, and it's actually kind of, you know what fertilizer is, right? So it's fertilizer for the lower kingdoms. So repeat that 3 times. Altogether for maybe 6 to 10 minutes it'll take to repeat 3 vortices. And I like to add in the last one that this is particularly fine material, fine energy that we're drawing together to make this one, that scrubs the body of any atom, molecule, or cell that is not in perfect harmony with our soul purpose. It can do that. The vortex can do that. We can imagine it. The soul certainly wants that to happen and is helping us with that. So it can really help with our health too, to remove what shouldn't be there. I read in Lawrencey that the masters are always perfectly healthy. And he said the reason was that nothing remains in their bodies that it shouldn't be there. So after vortexing, we, over the years, have developed a particular visualization that isn't in the Rainbow Bridge books, but I'm sharing it with you in case you want to use it. And that is the golden chalice. We imagine a big golden vessel in the center of the room, in the center of the group. Size, I guess, we've never been too specific. It's just a big golden chalice. And pouring into it from above is a stream of love, of the pink energy of love, and the golden bubbling energy of joy pouring into it as well. And they fill it immediately to overflowing, and it's splashing over, the joy and the love from the unlimited supply of joy and love in the higher worlds. There is no shortage. Our ability to accept it is the biggest limitation to it. And in this meditation, we accept it, we welcome it, and we invoke it, and pours into this chalice, floods over, and then we take a moment to send it out to whoever would like to bless with it, And people will say the names themselves or out loud, but we'll take a few moments and people will go around and say different names, and that energy is directed to flow out to those people. we're coming from a pretty good place by this point in the meditation. You know, we've invoked some good things and invoked our unity and our soul connection, and we've done some clearing and vortexing. We're in a good place to give. So as we share these streams of energy, we just let them flow for a little bit. It's a few minutes, this process. And then whoever's leading the group says, we release these streams, because we don't want them to just be my stream I've sent out to you. We want it to be a direct connection to the person, from the source to that person. We make it a point of releasing it to continue to flow to them afterwards. And then we all imagine taking hold of the chalice, stretching it out until it's bigger than the group, and it's immediately filled with this energy of love and joy, and we are immersed in it. And I like to visualize like maybe a 2-quart saucepan. Yeah. Scooping it up and pouring it over my head. The energy of love and joy, and being just saturated with it. And why not? This is what we're here. Being a happy, joyful, loving person is being a gift to the planet. And if you can, much of that energy as you can pick up and carry and share, the better. Then we close with the great invocation. This one we didn't dare degenderize. There are entire books written on how the rhythm of it, the pacing, the syllables have power. And just the fact that it's been said this way since it was released in the middle of World War II, I think it was. It's been said this way ever since then, and so we're adding to that same, we're reinforcing the power of this. This is an invocation. We're drawing these energies in, and for me, it's not a theoretical process. By the end of the meditation, by the time we finish this, I am completely charged with the spiritual energy and sometimes can't even speak. But that's me. It's everybody differently. Fortunately, I think I'll be able to keep speaking today, I hope. But I'm going to say it anyway and take a risk. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. So we pause there, and we've invoked energy. We need to give it a little time to flow through. And we just have now too, and I don't dare pause for too long, because we're live on the internet almost, soon to be. That's the meditation. I meant to put out a sign-up sheet. If anybody wants to be trying to form a group here, I can't come over every week like I used to keep the group going here. But if anybody wants to try to get a group going, I'd be happy to come help kickstart it, for the first time. But this is one thing about this, the outline I provided here. If you're basically familiar with these concepts, you can lead the meditation. It doesn't take me. It doesn't take somebody who, you just say these things with meaning. You can read them and know what they mean, and say them and knowing what they mean. Everybody can visualize and imagine light, soul star, the connections. It works very well. Todd and I have actually been co-leading the group in Port Townsend now, and we alternate, and he does it somewhat differently than I do. I've gotten used to that. but it's actually worked out very well, I think. It actually gives us each a chance to go deeper with it than we're trying to remember what we have to say next. So if you've got a group, you can just rotate around. It doesn't take a particular leader. So I've got a little time left, another 10 minutes or so. We'll talk a little bit further about what Norman and Josephine used to do, and about groups in general. Group dynamics can be such a wonderful thing. 3 people can have a very good group for about 6 years in Port Townsend. Amelia and Lynn and I, Lynn who isn't here, we met and we really got a long way with the phase 2 work. It got so powerful. And phase 2 work, as you can imagine, you're saying, if you're doing it by yourself, you're saying, I never do anything for you and you always do everything for me. Well, it'll push your buttons, but when you're in a group and you're saying it to each other, I never do anything for you and you always do everything for me. And then they say it back to you. So it pushes your buttons in a couple of different ways. And then you get to watch 2 people say it to each other, and that even pushes different buttons. So you get lots of ways to stimulate the patterns when you're working in a group. And we actually had a lot of fun with it. Sometimes we were laughing so hard we couldn't go on. And even now, if someone were to say to me, I always do everything around here, you never do anything, it would just make me laugh. It's just like one of these lines. I don't have any more buttons to push on the always and never do anything level. We've gone through that. We clear those patterns out. In a group, if you've got personalities, but the group is not about personalities. The group is about souls working together. We do take some time, an hour or so before the meditation, to share where we're at with everything. Share our spiritual experiences or even just what's going on in our lives. Everything in your life is a spiritual thing in a way. Just living is a spiritual challenge in a way, especially if you've already taken a step toward trying to understand it from that level. So we spend some time talking about those things, and that's the first hour. And the second hour is the meditation and whatever aftermath there might be of just sitting silently or talking afterwards and things that come up. All the patterns we have are about relationships. So I wanted to share with you a tool that has helped me tremendously with difficult relationships. It's a mantra in a way, and it's not in the Rainbow Bridge book, but if you're working in any kind of group, a group of coworkers or a family or a group of meditators, I bet you can find a time this might be useful. It was taught to me by Leonard Shaw, who is a counselor here in Seattle, who I think is a beautiful soul. He teaches about love and forgiveness, and I think it was my last talk I talked about how I've gone with him to Monroe Prison, and we've worked with prisoners and tried to heal their very bad situations and self-images and things like that. Just a beautiful guy. What he taught me helped me a lot in a tough part of my life. He said, instead of the mind racing through its pattern of, how could this person do this thing? I don't understand how it could be, it's just not right, or whatever, patterns you get into with other people. Instead of that, you say, I love you, I forgive you, I bless you, and I release you. We can release the people we love. It's okay. If we're holding them in some way, it's better that we do. The best kind of relationship is one where we're not restraining the other person. So even in a really good relationship, releasing the other person, it can be a very good thing. There's another interesting technique. Norman and Josephine did a lot more things than just work on the Rainbow Bridge books. They worked with the devas, the Devic kingdom, pretty intensely. They said there was a great deva of a San Onofre nuclear power plant that was actually a deva who had at one point taken a human incarnation so that it was able to communicate with language, and they would talk to it. And they discovered that, and maybe it taught them this, I'm not sure how they learned this, but the part of the whole idea of energy following thought are things you can build. They used to build these braided tubes of energy, of blue and purple energy. The braid would go this way for the purple and that way, the other way for the blue. And they would build a tube from their place out to the ocean and carry in the finer particles, the atomic material from the surf that continually grinds everything down to fine atomic material. They bring in high-grade atoms from the ocean. And they would link the devas that they found. They found huge devas at volcanoes when they traveled up the west coast. There was one they wouldn't go near, and I suspect it was Mount St. Helens. They just could see from a distance there, so they were that deva was scary. But other volcanoes and the missions up and down the California coast, each of those, they visit and they discover this devic material. It's unformed. And as soon as they recognized it and looked at it, it would form into an angelic figure. And apparently, Junipero Serra and the early friars who set those missions up had more going on than we know about, anchoring these devas there, angelic devas. An angel, deva, somewhat interchangeable terms. Deva is the broader category, angel being a particular level of devic being. Then they would link them together with these braided blue and purple tubes. They weren't aware of each other, these devas. They said one of them used to follow them around. The deva from San Juan Capistrano, once they told him it could move, it could go wherever it wanted to, it followed them and they'd drive off and it would stay with them and travel up the coast. Another really interesting construction that they did was the Buddhic column. The steps for making this are to gather together the Buddhic threads of energy in a region into a column, invoke the five-pointed star of the Christ at the top. And this column, they would build these at prisons and hospitals or, downtowns in the cities, and they'd make them 30, 50 feet tall. It was part of their group work that they did. They'd gather together these threads and put the star at the top, and then set up an inverted spiritual vortex that spun to a point that ended in the star. And it would continually sweep up all the stuff in the atmosphere in the region, the hospital, or wherever it was, and suck it up, and it would be burned in the star, and light would radiate out from burning the human, mental and emotional junk that was floating around. And they would turn it over to the devas when they were done and leave those standing there doing continual purifying work. And I don't know if it seems to be with these devic structures, if you don't revisit them every so often and give them a little push, they eventually just dissolve away. I'd be surprised. But I think also masters and the people who are really capable of clear, definite thoughts can create something of such clarity that it's almost a permanent structure.
Can we build them from a distance?
Yeah, you can build them from wherever. We've actually, in different groups, we've taken on the exercise of building one over, imagining the local hospital or at a prison or a busy intersection where people are having accidents. We'd try to clear the energy out of that. So that's just an example of the kind of things that people who've gone a lot further and have the means to investigate can come up with. So I really encourage you to investigate the Rainbow Bridge techniques, and if you're of the mental type that wants to understand a lot more, the Lawrence books explain to a great degree. The Bailey books are wonderful for intuitive grasping. Theosophical teachings, Leadbeater in particular, is the closest to Lawrence as far as having very definite descriptions and explanations of things. And it doesn't take an esoteric understanding of everything to do these techniques. It just takes a soul impulse. If you're feeling that impulse, it's worth investigating. But don't go halfway through, make a certain amount of commitment to it. You don't want to put the channel halfway through and stop. Okay, that's obviously not such a good idea. You don't want energy flowing through and then just stopping there. You want to make sure, if you're going to start building a channel, make sure it goes all the way through. There are some obvious dangers to avoid with these kind of things. So, the talk is, time is up. Talk's officially over. I'm going to stay here for some questions if anybody has any, but you won't offend me if you leave because the talk is officially over. So thank you.